She stood at those double doors, heart pounding, 3 tiny hands gripping hers. Through the frosted glass she could hear the music, the laughter, the champagne toasts. This was the moment. She pushed the door open, and the music stopped. Every head turned. The groom, standing there with his arm around his new bride, went white as a sheet. Someone gasped. "Wait, ain't that his ex-wife? I thought she couldn't have kids." But there she was, Claire Thompson, holding the hands of 3 identical toddlers, all with his unmistakable brown eyes and dimpled chin. The bride looked confused, glancing between the children and her new husband. His champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. And Claire just stood there, watching the man who once called her Barren come face to face with the 3 beautiful children he never believed she could have. He called me Barren once, she thought. But God always has the final word. 5 years earlier, Claire had met Marcus Anderson at a community fundraiser. He was ambitious, charming, worked in finance and came from a respectable middle-class family. Claire was a teacher, gentle-spirited, the kind of woman who believed in the goodness of people and the power of faith. Their wedding was beautiful, held in her grandmother's garden with white roses everywhere. For the first 2 years, marriage was everything Claire dreamed of. They laughed together, prayed together, talked about the family they would build. But month after month, the pregnancy test came back negative. At first they weren't worried. "These things take time," Marcus would say. But as months turned into years, the mood in their home shifted. The laughter became less frequent, replaced by heavy silence that sat between them like an uninvited guest. Claire started seeing doctors, undergoing test after test. The diagnosis came back: unexplained infertility. Marcus grew distant, his patience wearing thin. He started working late, coming home smelling like whiskey and cologne that wasn't his. The real pain came from his family. His mother would make little comments at Sunday dinners. "When are you going to give my son a child?" As if Claire was withholding something on purpose. The whispers behind her back at family gatherings were like knives. "She can't give him what he needs. Maybe he married the wrong woman. What kind of wife can't even get pregnant?" And Marcus, instead of defending her, would just sit there silent, looking at his plate, making her feel like she was failing him in the most fundamental way. One night after another difficult family dinner, Claire broke down in their bedroom. "Marcus, I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can. Please don't give up on us." He looked at her with eyes that had gone cold. "Maybe God never meant for you to be a mother, Claire. Maybe this is his way of telling us something." Those words shattered something inside her that night. Things continued to deteriorate. Marcus became emotionally abusive, his words cutting deeper than any physical wound. He would come home and criticize everything: the dinner she made, the way she kept the house, even the way she smiled. Claire found herself walking on eggshells, trying desperately to please a man who had already checked out. Her best friend Jasmine would hold her while she cried and say, "Sometimes God closes one door to open another you can't even see yet." For years into their marriage, Claire went to see a new specialist. She sat in that sterile office and waited for results. When the doctor came in, she had a gentle smile. "Mrs. Anderson, I've reviewed your case thoroughly. The original diagnosis of complete infertility doesn't align with what I'm seeing. Your chances aren't great, but they're not zero. There's still hope." For the first time in months, Claire felt something stir in her chest. She drove home with trembling hands, rehearsing how she would tell Marcus, how maybe this news would bring them back together. But when she walked through the front door, she found divorce papers on the kitchen table, his signature already scrawled at the bottom. Marcus walked in an hour later. "You're not the woman I need anymore, Claire. I want a family and you can't give me that. I've met someone else, someone who can give me what you couldn't." His voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing a business transaction, not the end of a marriage. Claire stood there holding those test results that said there was still hope, but the words died in her throat. She signed the papers with shaking hands, packed her things, and left the house with nothing but 2 suitcases and a heart that felt shredded. That night, sleeping on Jasmine's couch, Claire felt something inside her die. What she didn't know was that sometimes you have to fall completely apart before God can put you back together into something stronger, something beautiful. Before we continue with what happened next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, Click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The months after the divorce were the darkest of Claire's life. She moved to Atlanta, far away from gossiping relatives and pitying looks. She found a small apartment, got a job teaching at an inner-city elementary school, and tried to rebuild. Some days she felt like she was drowning. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, her pillow soaked with tears she didn't remember crying. But slowly, painfully, she began to heal. She started volunteering at a local hospital, reading to sick children, and found that giving love to others helped fill the void. She joined a support group for women dealing with infertility and divorce, and discovered she wasn't alone. 6 months after the divorce, Claire wasn't thinking about babies or Marcus anymore. She was just trying to survive. To find joy in small things like a good cup of coffee, or the way her students' faces lit up. She'd made peace with the idea that motherhood wasn't in her cards. But God had other plans. It started with exhaustion, the kind that made every step require monumental effort. Then came the nausea. Jasmine showed up one evening with a pregnancy test. "Just take it, humor me." Claire rolled her eyes, certain it would be negative, but she took it anyway. 3 minutes later she glanced down. 2 lines. Pregnant. Her hands started shaking. "That's impossible," she whispered. She took 3 more tests over the next 2 days, each one positive. The doctor confirmed it with an ultrasound. And that's when Claire got the second shock. "You're about 8 weeks along, and it looks like you're carrying triplets." Claire thought she was going to faint. Triplets? She'd been told she had less than a 5% chance of ever conceiving naturally. The doctor explained that sometimes it happened, that the body was mysterious and miraculous. Claire left that office, sat in her car, and wept. "God, you remembered me," she whispered through her sobs. The pregnancy was not easy. Claire was sick constantly, lost weight, and the doctors warned her that carrying triplets was high risk. But every kick, every hiccup reminded her that God had given her the impossible. At 37 weeks, Claire went into labor. Jasmine was by her side, holding her hand, whispering, "You can do this." In the early hours of a September morning, 3 perfect babies were born. She named them Noah, Elijah, and Grace, names that meant comfort, God is my strength, and unmerited favor. The next 3 years were a blur of diapers and sleepless nights and laughter and love. The triplets looked exactly like Marcus. They had his brown eyes, his dimpled chin, his thick dark hair. Sometimes when Claire looked at them she felt a pang of sadness for what could have been, but mostly she just felt grateful. Then one day, Jasmine showed her a wedding announcement. Marcus Anderson and Tanya Mitchell, set to marry at an upscale venue downtown. Claire stared at the photo and felt absolutely nothing. Good for him, I hope he's happy. 2 years later, Claire received an invitation to Marcus's wedding from a mutual friend. She was going to throw it away, but something made her pause. The triplets were 3 now, their personalities bright and bold, and they looked so much like their father it was almost eerie. That night, Claire sat at her kitchen table with tea and thought about everything. She thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, broken and defeated, and the woman she was now, strong and whole. She thought about Marcus, about how he'd looked at her with contempt when he served those divorce papers. And then she thought about Grace, about how God had turned her pain into purpose. She wasn't angry at Marcus anymore, but maybe he needed to see what God had done in her life. Not for revenge, but to show him that his words hadn't been the final word. So Claire made a decision. She was going to that wedding, and she was bringing her children. The day arrived, a beautiful Saturday in October. Claire dressed the triplets in matching outfits, the boys in tiny suits and Grace in a white dress. She wore a simple navy dress, nothing flashy. She wasn't trying to make a scene, just showing up as herself. The reception was already in full swing when they arrived. Claire could hear music and laughter. Her heart was pounding but her steps were steady. When she reached the double doors she paused. "God, let this be for your glory, not mine." Then she got out, helped the triplets from their car seats, took Noah and Elijah by the hand while Grace gripped her dress, and walked toward the entrance. She pushed open the doors and stepped inside. It took a few seconds for people to notice her. But once they did, a ripple of recognition spread through the crowd. Heads turned, conversations halted. Claire's eyes found Marcus with his bride on his arm, both laughing. Then Marcus looked up and saw her. His face went white. His eyes moved from Claire down to the three children who looked exactly like him. His mouth fell open. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent room. The bride looked confused, glancing between Claire and Marcus and the children. "Wait," someone whispered loudly, "ain't that his ex-wife? I thought she couldn't have kids." Claire just stood there, calm, not saying a word, letting the scene speak for itself. She watched Marcus's face cycle through shock, disbelief, confusion, then something that looked like grief. The bride tugged on his arm, her voice rising. "Marcus, who is that? Why do those kids look like you?" But Marcus couldn't answer, frozen, staring at the three little ones who had his eyes, his chin, his hair. Guests started whispering, pointing, pulling out phones. The atmosphere shifted from celebratory to awkward to something close to scandalous. Noah tugged on Claire's hand. "Mommy, why is everyone staring at us?" Claire knelt down, smoothing his hair. "It's okay, baby, we're not staying long." She stood up, looked Marcus directly in the eye, and in that moment communicated everything she'd never been able to say. "I'm not here to ruin your day," her eyes said. "I'm just here to show you that God's plans are bigger than your words." She turned to leave, but Marcus suddenly broke free and rushed toward her. "Claire, wait, please." She paused but didn't turn fully, just waited. He came to stand in front of her, tears streaming down his face. "Are they?" His voice broke. "Are they mine?" Claire looked at him for a long moment. "No, Marcus, they're not yours. They're mine. God gave them to me after you told me I'd never be a mother. I didn't come here to cause problems. I came because I was invited, and because I wanted you to see that your words weren't the final word over my life." She shifted Grace onto her hip. "You made your choice 5 years ago and I've made my peace with it. I hope you find happiness, Marcus, I really do. But my children and I, we're already happy. We're already whole." And with that, she walked out of that reception hall with her head held high, leaving behind shocked whispers and one very shaken groom. As Claire buckled the triplets back into their car seats, Noah asked, "Mommy, why was that man crying?" Claire kissed his forehead. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they realize they made a mistake, baby. But it's okay, everyone makes mistakes. That's why we have forgiveness." She drove away without looking back, her heart at peace. That evening after putting the kids to bed, Claire sat on her balcony with tea and looked up at the stars. She thought about the journey, the pain, the way God had taken her brokenness and turned it into something beautiful. She prayed for Marcus, prayed that he'd find peace and healing just like she had. She'd forgiven him long ago, not because he deserved it but because holding on to unforgiveness would have poisoned her own joy. 2 weeks later, Claire received a letter. The handwriting was Marcus's. She almost threw it away, but curiosity won. "Claire, I don't even know where to start, or if you'll even read this. Seeing you at the wedding with those children destroyed me. I've spent the last 2 weeks thinking about everything I said to you, everything I did, and I'm drowning in regret. I was cruel when you needed me most. I blamed you for something that wasn't your fault. I told you that you'd never be a mother, and seeing those 3 beautiful kids who look like what our children could have been broke something inside me." Tanya called off the wedding. She said she couldn't marry a man who clearly still had unfinished business with his past. "I don't expect your forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry. You were always too good for me and I was too stupid to see it. I hope you and your children have a beautiful life. You deserve all the happiness in the world." The letter was signed simply Marcus. Claire read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. She felt a strange mix of sadness and peace. Sadness for what could have been, but peace because she'd already moved on, already built a new life. She never responded to the letter. There was nothing left to say. Some chapters are meant to close completely. And that's exactly what Claire did. She moved forward, poured her love into her children, excelled in her career. She'd learned that her worth wasn't tied to a man or her ability to bear children. Her worth came from being a child of God. The triplets grew up knowing they were miracles. Claire told them age-appropriate versions of her story, teaching them about resilience and faith. And sometimes when she tucked them into bed and looked at their peaceful faces, she'd remember the day she walked into that wedding, remember the look on Marcus's face, and she'd smile. Not because she'd hurt him, That had never been her intention, but because that moment had been a declaration, a testimony to everyone who'd ever counted her out. She'd been called barren, broken, inadequate. But God had said otherwise. And in the end, it was God's opinion that mattered. Now I want you to think about something. If you were in Claire's position, if someone you loved had told you that you'd never amount to something, and then God proved them wrong in the most spectacular way, how would you respond? Would you seek revenge? Would you rub it in their face? Or would you choose grace the way Claire did? It's easy to say we take the high road when we're not living through the pain. But when you've been wounded deeply, choosing forgiveness over bitterness is one of the hardest things a person can do. Claire's story isn't just about infertility or divorce or miraculous triplets. It's about the power of faith to sustain us through the darkest valleys. It's about choosing to believe God has a plan even when everything says otherwise. It's about understanding that sometimes the people who break us are the ones who push us toward our destiny. Think about the moments in your own life when you felt discarded, when someone made you feel like you weren't enough. Maybe it was a parent who said you'd never succeed, a partner who said you weren't worthy of love, a friend who betrayed your trust, or an employer who said you'd never amount to anything. Those words hurt. They burrow deep and sometimes stay there for years, shaping how you see yourself, limiting what you believe you can achieve. But here's the truth Claire learned that we all need to remember. People's words about you are not God's final word over you. Just because someone couldn't see your value doesn't mean you don't have value. Just because someone walked away doesn't mean you're not worth staying for. Just because someone said you'd fail doesn't mean you will. God has a way of taking the very thing someone used to shame you and turning it into your greatest testimony. For Claire it was children. For you it might be something else, a business everyone said would fail but that thrives, a talent someone said you didn't have but that becomes your career, a healing doctors said was impossible, but that God provides, a relationship everyone said wouldn't last but that becomes your greatest joy. The question is, when God does bless you, when He does turn your situation around, how will you respond? Will you be gracious or vindictive? Will you use your testimony to inspire others, or to shame those who doubted you? Claire walked into that wedding not to destroy Marcus, but to demonstrate that God's faithfulness outweighs human rejection. She could have been cruel, could have made a scene, could have aired his dirty laundry. But instead she simply showed up as herself. As a woman who'd survived and thrived, and let the truth speak for itself. And here's something else. What if Marcus's rejection was actually God's protection? What if Claire had gotten pregnant while they were still married? She would have been tied to a man who didn't value her, raising children in a toxic environment, never fully healing. But because he left, Claire was free to rebuild herself, to discover her own strength, to raise her children in a home filled with peace and love rather than resentment. Sometimes what feels like the worst thing is actually God closing a door that needed to be closed so He could open one you never would have walked through otherwise. I know it's hard to see that when you're in the middle of the pain. When your marriage is falling apart or you're facing a terrifying diagnosis, or you've lost a job or someone you trusted has betrayed you. It doesn't feel like protection. It feels like punishment. But time reveals that God was working behind the scenes all along. So if you're in your own valley right now, if you're facing something that feels impossible, if someone has spoken words over your life that have left you feeling hopeless, I want you to hear this. Their words are not the final word. Your current situation is not your permanent situation. What you're walking through right now is preparing you for where God is taking you next. Hold on, keep praying, keep believing, and watch what God does. The same God who gave Claire triplets after she was called barren, the same God who restored what the enemy tried to steal, is watching over your life right now. He hasn't forgotten you, He hasn't abandoned you, and He's not done writing your story. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's your biggest takeaway from Claire's story? Have you ever been in a situation where someone counted you out but God proved them wrong? How did you handle it? Did you choose grace or did you struggle with bitterness? And if you're currently in a painful season, what's one thing from this story that gives you hope? Also, if this story touched you, if it made you think or feel or reflect on your own life, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life might be changed by Claire's testimony. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share real stories about real people who've overcome incredible odds, Stories that remind us that no matter what we're facing, there's always hope. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, sometimes the people who break you are the reason you bloom. Your pain is not wasted. Your struggle is not meaningless. And your story is not over.